In episode 163 of the Guitar Music Theory podcast, I have another installment of How Does This Song Work, featuring Jack and Diane by John Mellencamp. Greetings, guitar engineers. Welcome to the Guitar Music Theory podcast. If you're captivated by the magic of guitar music and eager to unravel the mysteries of music theory, you're in the right place. I'm Desi Cerna, your host, fellow guitar enthusiast, and author of Fretboard Theory, Guitar Theory for Dummies, Guitar Picking Mechanics, and more. In each episode of this podcast, I delve into the fascinating world of guitar and music theory, demystifying complex concepts and providing practical insights to help you become a more informed and skilled guitarist. Together, we'll explore chord progressions, scales, improvisation techniques, and more, unlocking the secrets that make guitar music an irresistible art. Today, in episode 163, I have another installment of How Does This Song Work, featuring Jack and Diane by John Mellencamp. This is a nostalgic rock song that tells the story of two American teenagers growing up in a small town. Released in 1982 on Mellencamp's album American Fool, the song captures a snapshot of youthful romance and the inevitable passage of time. Musically, Jack and Diane features a distinctive blend of rock and folk elements, characterized by its memorable acoustic guitar riffs. The same few chords are used throughout the song, yet each section sounds different because of the use of different chord inversions and chord shapes. I reference this song when I teach caged chord forms because it's such a great example of how you can get a variety of sounds out of basic chords by changing how you voice them. Today's podcast episode is going to be a great discussion, but before we get started, what should you specifically be working on right now in order to become a better guitarist? Go to my website, guitarmusictheory.com. Answer the question I ask you about your playing, and I'll send you free custom video instruction that's calibrated to your current level. Whether you're a beginner still needing to learn the basics, or you need help with bar chords, finger picking, guitar soloing, or understanding music theory, I have a free course for you. I can provide you with a plan to put you on track to fill gaps in your playing so you can move forward and reach your music goals. Enroll in your free video course now at guitarmusictheory.com. You can click on the link in the podcast show notes. All right, on to today's lesson. How Does This Song Work? Jack and Diane by John Mellencamp. All right, so we are ready to dive in. I'm using an acoustic guitar today. This is a PRS SE Angelus acoustic guitar. I have it plugged into a Fishman or a Spectrum acoustic DI just for some EQ and to pump a little more natural sound into it. But you're also probably going to be hearing this guitar acoustically. It's going to bleed into my vocal mic here. But it sounds like this. All right, so this is a great song to learn. I actually highly recommend that every guitarist learn this song. If you're interested in pop and rock music, it's kind of like a must-know. It's very simple. It's in the key of A. So think about an A major chord in the A major scale. And then think about chords 1, 4, and 5, the three major chords in a key. That would be A, D, and E. And you know, the simplest of songs are usually based on the three major chords in a key, 1, 4, and 5. And that's what this song is based on. However, the guitar sounds a lot more interesting than just... Seems like there's more going on to it. Well, there is, but it's still just basic forms of A, D, and E. So let's start at the top of the song here. I just played a portion of it for you a moment ago. It sounds like this. I can do that better. By the way, these strings sound dead on this guitar. I probably should have restrung this before I recorded this. Oh well, too late. So this is the top of the song. So we've got the acoustic guitar playing at the top of the song, but we also have an electric guitar that kind of adds a rock edge, like a just crunchy guitar, and adds texture there as well. And I believe the electric guitar is playing the same thing. So we're starting on an A here. I'm in the 5th position, so think about just a standard A form bar chord, barring at the 5th fret, you know. I'm sorry, that's an E form bar chord, but it's an A when we're at the 5th fret. But I'm playing just the top 4 strings, like an F shape, moved up here with my index finger at the 5th fret, and then I'm using the open 5th string, A, and so that's my chord voicing there. What does that mean, voicing? Voicing refers to how are you stacking the notes of a chord. Are you stacking it A, E, A, C sharp? Or are you stacking it E, A, C sharp, E? You can take the notes of a chord, in this case A, which is A, C sharp, and E. Well, you can stack those notes in different octaves and move things around, and so you get different chord voicings. How are you voicing the chord? In this case, I'm voicing it like this. That's A, C sharp, E, A, and then I'm putting the open 5th string A. So right off the bat, well, this sounds a little bit different than if I was just in the open position playing a standard open A chord. There's open position A chord, the cowboy chord, and then here's playing a partial bar chord at the 5th fret. Hear the difference? Both of these chords are labeled A in music, but they sound different because they are voiced differently. The notes are stacked differently. And then from here, we go to this beautiful sounding chord. What is that? Desi, I thought you said this was just the 3 basic major chords in the key of A. That sounds far too rich and colorful just to be one of the basic major chords. Well, it is one of the basic major chords. It's E. I'm playing a first inversion of it with its third in the bass, and then I'm putting the open A string. I am pedaling on that, a pedal tone, sustaining that note in the bass position. So here's E in the open position. There's your cowboy chord E. And the chord voicing that's actually used in Jack and Diane, it's based on a C form chord. This is part of the cage system, the caged chord forms that I teach in my music theory books and videos. So this is where you take a C chord, open position C chord, and you move it up the neck, you turn it into a bar chord. It's a very difficult bar chord to play. You got a bar with your index finger and then use your remaining fingers to build the C shape, and you move it around the neck. Here I am building it off of E at the 7th fret on the A string. So this is an E chord in C form, as we would say. And the notes are E, G sharp, B, E, G sharp. I'm going to play its first inversion. That means I'm going to put its third in the bass position. So here's G sharp, B, E, G sharp. And then I'm going to play the 5th string open. That's A. And that's not normally part of an E chord. And I get that sound. This would be called an E/A. Whenever you have slash chords in music, whatever comes first is the chord, E. And then after the slash is your bass note, if you have an alternate bass note. Because usually if you play an E chord, you expect to have E as your bass note. So if something is different than the name of the chord, then you indicate that with a slash. So E/A means E chord with an A in the bass position. So that's why this chord sounds different. It's just got more depth and color to it because it's not just your stock standard E chord. The voicing is a little different. And then we have an alternate bass note in there. So at the beginning of the song, we're going back and forth between A and that E. And then I take this same shape that my fingers are on and I just go down 2 more frets, and what comes before E in the alphabet? D. And it turns into a D with an A in the bass position. Same chord voicing though. It's stacked with its 3rd, 5th, root, 3rd. And then put the A in there. Now, the notes of a D chord are D, F sharp, A. So putting the alternate bass note in here, it does change the sound of the chord, and we do need to specify that in its note name, so we would call that D/A. Well, D already has an A in it. It's the 5th, so this would be having the 5th in the bass, so you might consider this to be a second inversion. So major chords are made of a root, 3rd, and 5th. If you put the 3rd in the bass position and drop the root, we call it a first inversion. If you put the 5th in the root position and drop the 1st and the 3rd, we call that a second inversion. So think of it this way when you're thinking about a major triad. You can stack the notes 1, 3, 5, or you can put 1 on top and stack it 3, 5, 1. That's the first inversion. Or you can put the 3rd up on top and stack it 5, 1, 3. See how we're just kind of leapfrogging the numbers over one another? And that's your chord, first inversion, second inversion. Now in the guitar, we typically don't just only play 3-note chord voicings. You know, when we do something like an open E major chord, we actually have 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1. But anytime you play a major chord, regardless of how the notes are stacked and how many occurrences you have of your root or your 3rd or your 5th, if you have the 3rd in the bass position, in this case G sharp for an E, that's called the first inversion. If you have the 5th in the bass position, in this case B for the E chord, that's called the second inversion. So back to our D chord that we ended with. You can consider that a second inversion of a D chord because technically we've got A in the bass position here. But really, what I'm thinking about in my head is I'm using chords A, E, and D, and I'm sustaining or pedaling the A open on each chord. Like a pedal tone, that's where organists would have certain pitches at their feet and they would hold a pedal with their feet and then they could play chords over the top with their hands. A pedal tone. And that makes this sound a little bit more interesting. It doesn't just sound like your stock standard chord changes. If I do this with stock standard chord changes in the open position, it sounds like this. And then here it is with the chord voicings and that A in the pedaling in the open, and that A pedaling in the bass position. That's what I wanted to say. Let's go back to the stock standard cowboy chords for a second. And compare that to hear the difference there? So, simple stuff, basic chords, just changing how we voice the chords, the position that we're playing in, how we're stacking the notes, and you can see that there's a lot of different sounds that you can make with basic chords. You can create a lot of different variety when you understand how to move around the fretboard, how to play the chords in different shapes and different voicings, different inversions, all of these things. And so if you're like a basic guitar player and you just know your standard cowboy chords, as we call them, and you're thinking, well, maybe the next step is I need to get into fancier chords. I need to know like extensions and altered chords or something like that. Not so fast. If you're a fan of pop rock music, you need to understand all the different ways that you can create different sounds and variety with different voicings and inversions and fingerings with your basic chords moving around the neck. So explore that first. You can see some of my guitar theory materials. You'll want to take a look at the chapter where I teach caged chord form. C-A-G-E-D spells caged. Those are the 5 basic chords that we play in the open position, but we can move all of those around the fretboard and play them as bar chords. Then we can break them up and do pieces of them to create different sounds, different voicings. Anyway, we're moving on here. So we've got this intro, and after you land on that D chord, we just have this simple little part where you go, and it just repeats. That's the open 4th string D. All right, so next we head into the verse, and it's built around this great and simple little acoustic guitar riff and Mellencamp's storytelling vocals, which are delivered in like a conversational, almost spoken word style. But as guitarists, we're going to focus on this part. All right, let's break it down. So what chords do you think are in use here? If you guessed the same chords, but we have new voicings that make this sound like a different part, that is correct. Of course, the rhythm is different too and stuff. So we're still starting here in the 5th position. So think about that E form bar chord, but instead of playing the whole thing, I'm mainly just focusing on the top like 3 or 4 strings. Probably could just be the first 3 strings, actually. Let's do that. So I've got... So that's A to E, and this is that same C form bar chord of E that we used earlier, but I'm just playing the top 3 strings now. So I've got its 5th, root, and 3rd. So that's a different inversion or different voicing than that or that. So it sounds different, but it's still an E chord. And I take this down 2 frets, and I've got a D chord, and it's actually the D that you know as the common open D chord. I'm just not playing its root, the 4th string. I'm just focusing on the top 3 strings. So I've got A, E, D, and then I come back up to E, back up to A. And if I simplify this, you could play it like... So let's just listen and appreciate the difference between that sound and if I had played this with just plain open chords. That sounds very basic, but this sounds different and it just sounds a little bit more distinct. We've got some 16th note strumming here, 1E into 2E into 3E into 4E into. There's some syncopation where instead of just putting the chords on the predictable downbeats, we got some chord changes that are happening on the upbeats here as I tap my foot on my little wood block. A little bit of some muted stuff here, so I'm kind of fretting those notes. and then I release the pressure that my fingers are applying to the strings to cut the strings off. And then as my strumming hand keeps moving, I get some of those muted strings, which can sound really nice and add almost like a little percussive element in there. So, great technique, strumming technique. If you're at that stage where you still need to learn how to do this with these 16th note strummings, you got to learn how to accent the down. Feel when you accent the downstroke or accent an upstroke, and applying pressure to sound the chord, and then releasing pressure to cut the strings off. Lots of good stuff to take away here. But we're not done yet, because there's some notes that were added to those chords. Instead of just going, it's actually here's A, C sharp, E, A. That would be a first inversion. We got the third in the bass position if you're paying attention. And then I'm adding, here's A on top. There's a root A on top. I go to the second in the scale. So when you play these little chord fragments, oftentimes you have some fingers free, and so you can kind of reach for other notes and add in some other notes there. So that would be adding a second. Now, the convention in music is, as we're in A here, our tonic pitch, or 1, in the scale is A, and then the second is B. So if I add a B to an A chord, if it's replacing the third C sharp, then we would call it an A sus2. That would be something like, that's where I played a B note that replaced the C sharp. If you're going to retain the third C sharp and add in a B, well, then we would call it A add 9. Why is the B, which is the second, called 9? Well, because if we play an A scale, so we got A, B is the second, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. B in the next octave is 9 notes away from our tonic pitch, and so since we're adding it there, and we're retaining the third, it's not a sus chord. When you take the third out with the second or the fourth, you're suspending the third, and that's why we call it a suspended fourth or a suspended second. We're not doing that here. We're just adding a B, so it'd be called A add 9. So briefly, we have an A add 9. Why so much explanation? Because this is the Guitar Music Theory Podcast, right? That's what you came here for. This is what I wrote books about. A add 9, then we go to that E chord, and it's in like a D shape, you know. Then the D chord, then back to E. How about a little ear training? What did I do to that E? Can you figure it out? There's my root E. There's the major third. There's the fifth in the lowest position. So this is a second inversion of an E chord. E is G, E, G sharp, B, but I'm stacking the notes B, E, G sharp. So it's fifth, root, third, and I'm going. So what was that? If you guess that I played an E suspended 4, you are correct. So here's E, it's third, G sharp, and I took that G sharp up to A. So now we have a fifth, root, and a fourth. And the fourth has replaced or suspended the third, so we call that E suspended 4 or E sus 4. So it's just another way, it's another thing that just makes this guitar part sound unique and distinct and gives it its feel and flavor. Not only are we using these small little chord fragments, We've got some funky 16th note syncopated rhythm. And then we're going to add in some extra notes with some of our free fingers here to add even more kind of variety to it. Then it repeats. And so that's the verse. That's when Mellencamp is singing, let's see. Little ditty about Jack and Diane, two American kids growing up in the heartland. Jackie gonna be a football star. Diane's debutante backseat of Jackie's car. Okay, singing was not so good there. However, I sang that and played that. Can you put the two parts together? I had to learn this years ago because I had to play this acoustically live, and I put some work into coordinating those two parts together. It's kind of tricky, but I was able to do it. All right, we've gone through the intro, we've gone through the verse, and then there's this little interlude section that comes up after this, and it's my favorite part because I just love the sound of these chord voicings. All right, so coming out of that verse, and then into this. All right, new section, new chords. Well, kinda. What do you think, as I take a drink here, what do you think, what chords do you think are being used here? As I knock into my microphone. If you guessed the same chords, but now we have, different versions of them, you are correct. Well, they're not completely different because we use some of these in the intro. So now instead of playing A here in the 5th position, I'm playing it down in the open position, your standard chord shape. I'm barring with my index finger, and then I'm not playing the 1st string. So I'm just doing, because I'm going to do the old Keith Richards trick where you bar with your index finger and then you add your 2nd and 3rd finger get that sort of sound. And I'm changing this A into a D/A, which we used in the intro. So think about barring at the 2nd fret to play an open A chord. You're going to add your middle finger to the 3rd fret of the 2nd string, ring finger to the 4th fret of the 4th string. This is actually a part of a D and C form. If I complete it by putting my pinky at the 5th fret of the 5th string, I have a C form bar chord for D. This is like the first chord you hear in Under the Bridge. Okay. Not an easy chord to play, but fortunately guitarists don't usually use it in its entirety. They take the pinky away and just play part of it like we're doing here in Jack and Diane. So we would just have the F sharp, A, and D. But we're going to put the A in the bass position here. We're back to pedaling on that A. So it's A, D, A. And you've got you're sustaining that tonic, which has just got a really nice sound to it. Then I'm taking that same D fingering, I'm going up 2 frets, so now it's an E/A. So we use these in the intro. In the intro, we actually fretted and strummed all the way to the 1st string, though, remember? But here, we're stopping after the 2nd string. And we're changing up the order of the chords here. In the intro, we went A to E. Here we're going A, D, A, and then into that E. And because the A is not part of an E chord, just creates a richer sound. It's almost like an A major 7 with, what would that be? A ninth in there? It's almost like an A major 9, basically is what it is. You could call that A major 9. But that's not the way I'm kind of hearing it or feeling it. I'm thinking of it more as we're going to that E, but we're keeping the A in the bass position. Maybe you don't hear it that way. Maybe you hear it as A, D, A. Maybe you hear it as A major 9 there instead of going to E. Whatever, you can come at this from different directions. It doesn't, either is correct. What's important is that you have some sort of understanding of what's going on here, and you can keep track of it in some way. When we play music, we could just memorize things. We could just memorize the tablature. People tell us where to put our fingers, and we just do that. And, if you play well, I guess you can sound good that way. But I like to understand what I'm doing. I like to understand what key I'm in, how the chords relate to that parent scale, what the movement is. That helps me learn songs because, once I pick up on a key, then I understand like the notes that I'm working with or have to work with. And then it just helps me figure things out better when I have an understanding of how things go together. It helps me remember music. I played in bands for years, and it was really helpful when I had to remember a lot of material if I had a basic understanding of how things went together. Because sometimes I forgot, like, what position was I supposed to be in, but I would just say, well, wait a minute, hold on, I'm in the key of this, and so, I was up here, I was playing the inversions, of course, and I figure it out, right? So it can be really helpful to help you remember songs and stuff. And of course, if you want to be creative or compose your own music, you can just experiment with just randomly putting your fingers at different frets on the fretboard. Actually, that's kind of a fun little game to play. I used to do that when I was a young guitarist, and sometimes you can come up with some interesting things. Just let your ear guide you and find some notes that sound good. But if you have a general understanding of how the fretboard works, of how music works, and harmony works, and chord inversions work, well, then that just makes it so much easier for you to be creative. You just have more control over what you're doing and exploring your options and all that stuff. So that's why this podcast exists. And that's why you could call this E/A or A major 9. Whatever makes sense to you, go with it. So we've got going back and forth between that A, D, A, E, D, then back to E. Oh, we got a finger free, our pinky, so why not just stick it in there and see if we can add a little something else to that. So I'm on that E chord, and I'm taking the B note up a whole step to C sharp, and then back. It's like alternating between E and playing the 5th and the major 6th. You do that like in blues and stuff. So just doing it here in the middle of the chord voicing. So that would be E. That's an E6 when you add the C sharp in there. Or E6/A. Hey, you know what? I've got the official tab at sheetmusicdirect.com pulled up in front of me, and I'm not even using it. So let's hop to that little interlude section, and I'm curious to see, what do they say? Okay, they say A, D/A, E/A. So they're thinking of it the same way I am. And then when you do this part, let's see. They're calling that, instead of calling it E6/A, they're calling it C sharp minor/A, because I guess if you change the E from E, G sharp, B, if you put a C sharp in there, then C sharp could be your root, which means E is your minor 3rd, which means G sharp is your 5th. So C sharp minor, I don't really hear it that way or feel it that way, like it's going to C sharp minor. So I might disagree with whoever notated this, and I just hear it that way. That's what I hear. I don't hear it going to C sharp. So maybe you do. I don't know. Maybe whoever transcribed this, sometimes, the program that they use will automatically kind of come up with names of chords based on analyzing the notes, and maybe that the software just came up with that. What would be the reasoning? Why would they do that? I'm thinking now. I can't think of the reason why they would choose C sharp minor over just calling it an E6/A. Do you have an idea? I don't know. Let me know. So back to this part. Yeah, I just love this part. I love the sound of these voicings. I love that open A string there. I just love the feel and the scratching the strings and stuff. I like that. Here it is. So it does take some experience to develop the right type of finesse and touch to apply pressure to the strings and then release it gently so you can do the and then apply the pressure again. And I'm sliding back and forth, so you got to pay attention to the fingering, sliding back and forth. You got to have that strum pattern and staying on beat with your 16th notes, and then release the pressure and stuff. And these are techniques that really make you sound like a good guitarist, and really take you beyond just strumming your cowboy chords. So this is just another reason why this song is so great to learn. I just love the rhythm, the strumming, the feel, the chord voicings, all of it. So anyway, if we move on, we kind of just repeat those parts. It goes back to the intro again. And then it goes back to the verse again. Sucking on chili dogs outside the tasty freeze. How about that, right? Sucking on chili dogs outside the tasty freeze. I won't say the next line. But anyway, we play through the verse there again. I got a little sloppy there for a second. Did you notice that? So as you're playing just the top three strings, but you're strumming 16th notes, it's hard just to target the strings that you want. So I have to place my fingers down. I wrap my thumb, and that helps me mute the sixth string. But then as I place my fingers down for these chord shapes here, whatever finger is on the third string, I'm placing it down on the string and fretting that note, but I'm fretting it with like the back portion of my fingertip so that the finger bumps into the fourth string above the third string. And I do that, like on this A, for example, because I don't want to get that fourth string in there. So I'm fretting this index finger, middle finger, but the middle finger is, I'm giving the fourth string the middle finger here, is what I'm trying to say. My middle finger is bumping into the fourth string as I fret the third string. So that when I strum, I'm going to try to focus on strings 1, 2, and 3, but if I accidentally hit that fourth string, it's not going to ring. And then when I go to this E shape in D form, think about how you do a standard D chord. Now my index finger's on the third string, and so it's fretting the third string, but I'm bumping into the fourth string. So subtle little techniques like this are so critical. Hey, if you need help with this sort of thing, because you're still kind of a beginner level and you're trying to develop technique to just strum chords in time and clean up your chords and stuff so you don't have unwanted string noise and that sort of thing, you might want to take a look at my Essential Skills course. If you don't know about it, send me an email and I'll send you a link. Anyway, so after this verse, we go back to the interlude section, and during this section is, he sings over it with the, oh yeah, so long after the thrill of living it's gone. Oh yeah, so life goes on. Long after the thrill of living it's gone. So it's played a little bit differently. They just keep repeating that there, and he sings over the top. And I could sing this better, folks, if I really belted it out, but I don't feel like doing that right now. But hey, give me some credit because I did sing and play that syncopated strum pattern at the same time. Now, I want to talk about the bass line that comes in during this little interlude section. So the bass comes in and goes. And I love the bass line there, and it's just it's nice how it kind of goes up into a higher octave, and it's kind of following the chord changes here. So let's think about this. So first of all, there's a tonic pitch A, and instead of just going into it, you have this nice little lead in, and very typical to do this sort of movement on bass. And I just think of it as kind of being like a pentatonic thing. A, because this is E, F sharp, A, B, A. So that's like the A major pentatonic, basically. That's the root. That's a fifth, sixth, root, second, root. So 5, 6, 1. Or 5, 6, 1, 2, 1. Take my breath away. Nice little way to lead into a note when you're on a major chord. And then from here, it goes down half step to G sharp because the chord is going to E. So it's following the chord changes, but it doesn't play the root E. It went down a half step. But think about, or, because you're going, let's see, da 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 da. It's going up to that E there. So it follows the G sharp and the E chord. And then it goes down a whole step to F sharp because that's in the D chord. So you could think of the bass as kind of playing inversions there, right? It's called a first inversion when you put the third of the chord in the bass position. So E's first inversion has G sharp in the bass position, and D's first inversion has F sharp, and the bass is following that. A, G sharp, F sharp. So and then after that, F sharp, the bass goes down to E, so now it's on the root of the E chord. So A for the A chord, G sharp for the E chord, F sharp for the D chord, E when it goes back to E. Nice little descending bass line here that is not just playing the roots. Sometimes people will ask me that. They'll say, hey, I play bass, and I'm never really sure how to use triads or something like that, because, you can play bass and just kind of thump on the roots and get by for a while, but it's like, why do you need to learn about chord construction and stuff like that? Well, here's an example of that, because sometimes you might want to have a part that doesn't just follow the roots, and this is a good example of that. So, and then just goes down to A, Okay, so here now it's just playing the roots. So A, E, D, E. It's skipping the A, D. It's just treating that like an A chord. So da 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 da. And it just plays the roots at that point. Sometimes instead of this A, the bass goes up to that A. And then it ends. D, D, A. But the bass goes D, C natural, A. So here's the whole thing. I may not be playing it exactly like it, but trust me, I'm super close. So the ending is really cool. So, you know, D, D, A, but the bass player goes, whoa, where does that C natural come from? That's not in the scale. We should have a C sharp in the A scale. C is a minor third, and what the bass player is doing here is adding in a little bluesy flavor, a little bluesy tension there. So with that C natural, that's a flat third or a minor third. So and it really kind of, it's nice. It's interesting how just that subtle little change, putting in a minor third there, really sets up. It changes the tone of things, because now we're going to go into that drum break where dynamically now the song is kind of changing radically. Now we have this ginormous drum sound with these huge iconic drum fills, and so it really just kind of increases the energy here, and it's just so perfect that the bass leads into that and kind of sets that up with just one simple little change. Let's put that minor third in there and give it a little blues rock sound. So you know, let's take a listen to those drum fills. I'm going to pull up the original recording on Spotify here. Here we go. So I consider these to be some of the most famous, iconic drum fills ever. There are so many drum fills that I'm a huge fan of. I can think of Jeff Porcaro's drum fills in Rosanna, or I can think of, you know, when John Bonham comes in on Stairway to Heaven. But when I think, okay, like classic pop rock songs, what are like the most memorable, most iconic drum fills? And without giving this too much thought, a few songs come to mind. One is Jack and Diane, which I understand was inspired by In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. And then my personal list would also include Rush's Tom Sawyer, you know, Neil Peart's fills there. And I would probably say, if I had to pick what is the most iconic drum fill or drum fills of all time, I think I would have to say the Phil Collins song. Such a huge hit, so memorable. That's something that not just drummers or guitarists or musicians know. That's something that everybody is familiar with. Jack and Diane would be up there as well because of its popularity. And I think Tom Sawyer, even though Rush are one of my personal favorites, I think Tom Sawyer might come in maybe third in terms of being memorable. Some people might think, well, Tom Sawyer is far more iconic. There's more technique involved in that sort of thing. Anyway, I thought, hey, you know what? While we're talking about this song, the drummer on this track is Kenny Aronoff. And, you know, he has an interesting story about putting these drum fills together. And he really talked about how, you know, this song became John Mellencamp's #1 hit. And this transition here and these fills and then the beat that follows, really took this song to another level and turned it into, the huge, massive hit that it is. And of course, it just skyrocketed John Mellencamp's career, but it also made Kenny Aronoff a well-known drummer, and really ignited his own career as well. So I thought I would just take a minute. I pulled up an article that I found on Modern Drummer back from 2017. It's called Kenny Aronoff on John Cougar's Jack and Diane. And so he talks about it, recording this song. And I just thought it was really interesting, even though this is not a drum podcast. Let me just read a portion of it. So Kenny, the drummer, says, the process of writing, arranging, and rehearsing and recording a John Cougar Mellencamp song went something like this. John would come to rehearse with the song and either play it on his acoustic guitar while singing or play a cassette tape of him playing and singing it. The challenge for me was always to come up with a simple, cool beat that would make the song special and inspire John and the band to come up with cool hook lines, parts, and arrangements for the song, and to ultimately get his song on the radio to be a number one hit single. He wanted my drum parts to be hook lines, and they were for a lot of his songs. So it's interesting that like the focus was, we need something catchy, we need something hooky here, we need something that's going to make this a hit, and no pressure, I guess, huh? So Kenny goes on to say, we had to take his songs and arrange them in such a way that they would get everyone's attention and people would want to hear that song over and over again. We all knew Jack and Diane was a cool song and possibly a hit, but we weren't sure what to do with it except for the obvious. The obvious parts didn't make the song special enough, though, and John knew it more than anyone. As soon as I heard the song, I played an obvious beat, accented eighth notes on the hi-hat, a cross stick on 2 and 4 on the snare, that eventually turned into a heavy backbeat on the snare, and the bass drum on the ah of 1 and the and of 2. This beat and the groove and all of our parts together sounded great for the first intro, verse, and chorus, but there was no way this would work all the way through the song. We needed to develop the song with new parts and ideas to keep everyone's interest. Yeah, right. It sounds great. And it's interesting to hear Kenny, a drummer, talk about, the of 1 and the and of 2. He's talking about the different way we subdivide beats in a measure with 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and the 1, the ah of 1, so 1E and 1 ah. It's talking about the kick pattern there, right? So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4. So 1. I'm playing it. Having a hard time saying it. 1 ah, 1 en ah. Anyway, it's good to learn how to count 16th notes and understand that that's something that musicians, even musicians that aren't really good sight readers necessarily, are usually familiar with basic counting of 16th notes and rhythms, just like they're familiar with basic keys and notes and key signatures too. Anyway, Kenny goes on to say, we eventually learned that whatever didn't sound great in the rehearsal room would sound worse in the recording studio. Everything is more exaggerated in the studio, so we knew that unless we came up with some cool parts and arrangements to this song, it wasn't going to make the record. We recorded American Fool at Criteria Studios in Miami, and the Bee Gees were recording in the next room. When we walked by their room, we heard the relentless programmed groove of the song they were working on. Not very rock and roll at all. They were experimenting, trying to come up with a new sound on their record. Then one day our producer walked into our main recording room with a Lin 1 drum machine. That's what the Bee Gees were experimenting with. My immediate thought was, I hope we aren't using a drum machine on our songs. I hated the idea of a drum machine replacing real drums. It wasn't that common in 1981, but John didn't care. All he was interested in at this point was making his song a hit single. Taking a drink here, folks. Kenny goes on. So I immediately grabbed the drum machine, read the manual, and programmed the beat I was playing on my kit. I used its floor tom sound to replace my kick drum part and its tambourine sound to replace my hi-hat part on my kit, and we used hand claps to replace the backbeats on my snare drum. Every sound I programmed on the Lin 1 had its own output on the back of the machine, which went to an individual track on the 24-track 2-inch recording tape that we were using to record our music. He goes on, after I programmed the drum parts on the Lin 1, I went into the lounge to play pool. Eventually, John called for me and said, "We want a drum solo after the second chorus." My immediate thought was, are you serious? A drum solo on a ballad? How the hell will I do that? We spent an entire day getting drum sounds in the big room. We had been recording drums in a small room to get that controlled sound, like most people did back then, but John wanted a huge drum sound, which was not common on commercial radio songs except for what Phil Collins had done on his song In the Air Tonight. When it came time for me to make my entrance, I decided to do something simple and powerful. I played and 4 on my kick and snare. Everyone in the control room gave me a thumbs up. John didn't like anything I did. I went into the control room to discuss what I was playing. Everyone was trying to make suggestions to me about what to play, and it actually was more confusing than helpful. As I walked back to my kit, I realized that if I didn't come up with a part, John would bring someone else into the studio to play the drums. There was no way I wanted that to happen. You know, I heard Kenny Aronoff say in other interviews that he really felt a tremendous amount of pressure trying to please John Mellencamp here, because that does happen in the studio. If an artist just doesn't feel like someone is giving them what they need, it's like, well, let's call somebody else in. And you don't want to lose your job. And, you know, if you become the guy that, the guy that can't produce, then, you're not going to work. So anyway, so he says he didn't want to let that happen. So he goes on and says, I had 25 feet to walk over to my kit and figure it out. 20, 15, 10, 5. I still wasn't sure what I was going to play. I sat at my drums and bam, the idea of playing the same rhythmic pattern I had been playing, but starting it 1/8 note later popped into my head. So instead of starting on beat 1, I started on the and of 1. Then instead of going down the toms like everyone else, I went up the toms. Just as I finished that part, he's talking about the tom-toms, for those of you that maybe aren't familiar. Just as I finished that part, John liked what I played, and he screamed into my headphones, "Hit a cymbal crash, cymbal," which I immediately did, and then I went down the drums, emulating a classic Phil Collins fill. When I ran out of toms, I decided to do quarter note triplet on. I'm sorry, people. When I ran out of toms, I decided to do a quarter note triplet on snare, rack tom, and floor tom, and my drum solo or musical idea was complete. John loved it. Let's listen to it again. I'm going to pull it up here, the recording. So let it rock. I want to be careful how much I play. I want to keep the copyright police off my back. But Kenny Aronoff goes on to say, then it was time for me to groove. I played the original groove to the song with a lot of power while playing 16th notes on my hi-hat. When I got to beat 4, I hit my snare with my floor tom together in order to get a big, powerful explosion. Hearing Steve Gadd play a Mozambique beat on a Chick Corea record gave me that idea. You get good musical ideas, folks, by listening to other people's music. Pro tip. Kenny goes on to say, John and I went back and forth on whether I should play the hi-hat all the way through this section, and I eventually settled on playing 16ths on beats 3, E, and from soft to loud, which created power and excitement into beat 4 on the snare and floor tom. It was Mick Ronson, David Bowie's guitar player, who was in the studio with us for a week, who suggested to John that people should sing the chorus a cappella over my drum groove. Kenny then says, not only did the song go to number 1, but so did the album American Fool, and it's still played on every radio today, 35 years later. The song basically launched my career. It was a big break. That album won 2 Grammys and sold millions of records. So that's the story behind those iconic drum fills. And yeah, we get into the next section of the song, which they sing a cappella. But let's just take a moment to analyze, like, what are the chords if we were going to play the chords. I'm going to attempt to sing this, but there's a bunch of voices in there. But it's something like, gonna let it rock, let it roll, let the Bible bell come and save my soul. Hold on to 16 as long as you can. Changes come around real soon, make us something like that. So it's still in the key of A here. Gonna let it rock, A to D, and then let it roll to the 5-chord E. So there's our 3 chords. Let the Bible bell come and save. Okay, here's where it changes. That's a flat 7 G. Flat 7 G, a little A mixolydian mode here temporarily. Save my soul to D. And then it goes into the hold on to 16 as long as you can. So again, that's just 1, 4, 4, 4, 5. Changes come around real soon, make us women and men. Trying to find a part to sing there, but D, E, 5-chord to A. So previously, everything in the song was just plain A major, except for where the bass added in that little blues element there with the minor third C. And then here we have a flat 7 G sound. So just mixing it up a little bit in this section. And I think it's one of the things that makes this section sound a little it get distinct, makes it sound different, and perhaps even just gives it a different flavor and energy. You know, dynamically, the song just takes a turn here, and with the drums and everything, I talked about the bass leading into it. So throwing in a flat 7 here was a great time to just do something a little different, add a little bit more flavor, add a little bit more energy, or at least play off of the energy that you've built with that iconic drum fill. And then after this, there really isn't anything new. They do change up the rhythm a little bit on one part, but, you know, it goes back to the, you know, oh yeah, life goes on. Back to this part. And they kind of repeat it. Little ditty about Jack and Diane. So just some variations on the same parts that you did before. Then you go back to the intro part, you know, with the electric guitar added, you know. But they changed the rhythm here a little bit. So more hits on the chords. So in the intro, it was simpler. It was just... But here it's... And it's kind of tricky to move your fingers that quickly between these chord voicings, if I'm honest. And get the rhythm right, and avoid unwanted noise on other strings. And basically, that's all you need to know about Jack and Diane. If you've never learned this song and you're a fan of pop rock and you just want to see a great example of playing some different chord voicings and shapes, and a great example of 16th note strumming and some great guitar technique, it's just all around a classic guitar song. And like I said, if you're a fan of pop and rock music, I think it's a must-learn song. All right, podcast episode 163 is a wrap. Now you know how the song Jack and Diane works. If you would like to make suggestions on other songs for me to cover in future podcast episodes, or you have any questions or comments about other things, go to my website, guitarmusictheory.com, scroll down and click on the contact link. And if you have not yet enrolled in a free video course, be sure to enroll. Whether you're a beginner still needing to learn the basics, or you need help with bar chords, finger picking, guitar soloing, or understanding music theory, I have a free course for you. I can help fill gaps in your knowledge and fill gaps in your playing so you can become a better player, have more fun on your instrument, move forward, and reach your music goals. So enroll in your free video course now at guitarmusictheory.com. You can click on the link in the podcast show notes. Don't forget that my books, including Fretboard Theory, Guitar Theory for Dummies, Guitar Rhythm and Technique for Dummies, and more, are available at Amazon.com. Beginning Monday, June 3rd, 2024, I begin a 6-week Music Theory 101 group Zoom class. So if you're listening before that date, then there's still time to enroll. You can head over to my website, click on the link that says Zoom Lessons, and you'll see the information on the class. You could also sign up for a private one-on-one lesson using Zoom as well. All right, guitar engineers, thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, give it a 5-star rating, and leave some comments or a review if you can. Then keep playing and stay tuned for more.